Welcome to another live episode of Teachers for Teachers. That's you, moms and dads. And I am here usually with Dr. Dejana Figueroa, who is going to join us any minute. That may have been her that I just heard with the doorbell. Or I guess not yet. Anyway, I am Dr. Leah Haynes, and I'm really excited to introduce you to someone today who I met about a year ago at a political function, and she just blew me away with her attitude and her enthusiasm for education. And so I would like to introduce you to Genein Letford. She is the founder of Cafe Strategies. She is an educator, a mom, an author of a best-selling book that I am fascinated by, and a speaker. And the book is called From Debt to Destiny. Here we have it. And so we're going to talk about a range of things today, both what it's like for her as a mom, homeschooling now, and how her time in education has influenced what she's working on now. So Genein, do you want to say hi? And then I will bring in Mark as well.
Sure, it's so awesome to be here. I'm so excited just to empower your audience with everything that I can.
Thank you. And of course, you know Dr. Mark Riddle, who is with us often, who has a background in both music and education, and he works for university in Irvine, West Coast University. Sorry about that, Mark. West Coast University. But remember, last time I was doing this, I forgot my name, so please don't. You want to say hi, Mark, so everybody knows who you are?
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be back once again.
Thank you. So, Genein, I'd really like to start with how did you make the leap from in-classroom educator to author, and not just author, because it's not just a book about education, which would be fine. It's a book about debt and how to pull yourself out of debt into financial freedom, creating financial freedom from the inside out. And I know you also do a lot of work on creativity. So how do these all kind of weave together?
Well, it started on a small, cold night in 1979, but I won't go to the very beginning. I'll go to the part when I was on my floor, sitting, crying my eyes out with a credit card bill in one hand and a $60,000 student loan bill in the other, and wondering how I got there. Because I played by the rules. I went to college. I didn't get in trouble, and yet I was under this financial burden. And I thought I did everything right. And that's just when it just dawned on me how I was missing. I had a great education, but I was missing a critical point or critical part of it, which was the financial part, the financial literacy and understanding how finances work and how money works and interest works. So, I was 30 and just trying to figure it out. And I read every book I could. And I remember finishing my first book thinking, I have a UCLA degree. Why don't I know this basic information? And then I worked on the debt. My husband and I just got to work and we paid off our last student loan bill. And it's actually a YouTube video. If you type in my name, you'll actually see me paying off that last bill. And it was just a wonderful feeling. But I knew, and being an educator, when you have something like this in your grips, you can't just keep it to yourself. You feel like you want to empower. And I was looking at my students who I was still teaching at the time and just seeing them on a conveyor belt to debt, and I was like, I feel like I have to warn them, and just saying, I love education. I love college. And if that is your plan, go, but be aware and have some strategic moves in place beforehand. So you know what you're getting into and you can hopefully not end up like I did and just not having any clue. So I started a nonprofit called alumni360.org, and your parents on there can go check it out because I do have a resource page where I talk about scholarships and I have a list of scholarships there. But it's just really getting my elementary school kids who are going off into junior high and high school and into higher ed, just giving them a heads up like, here's a budget, here's what your income would really look like, and the bills, no one shows them. Money is such a secretive thing for a lot of parents, and most of my kids came from a lower wealth background where most of the parents didn't have a huge knowledge base of investing and 401ks and all that good stuff. So yeah, I started the nonprofit, and we just started teaching everything I knew. But the turning point was when I realized my creativity, which I was like most people, I thought creativity was only artistry for so long. But then I realized my creativity, my ability to get out of the debt, to think about my skills, think about my diamonds, as I call them, my gifts, and reframe them, and then put myself in a position to bring in income to pay off the debt faster. That's what I really started to teach my students. Like, you guys should really look at really what makes you shine. And if you choose to do so, you can market that, learn how to bring it to market to bring in income to help you with your college, bills and things like that. So it was really the creative health affecting the financial wealth. And that's where all this sprang up from. So CAFE stands for Creative Advancement for Financial Empowerment, because they are connected, the creative thinking and the financial empowerment.
Awesome. Well, let me bring in Dr. Figueroa. Dr. Dejana just joined us. Thank you for joining, Dejana. And I'd like you to meet Genein.
So happy to be here. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to this conversation. I just came in. The work you're doing is quite inspiring. And I can't help, because me being the educator in me, I can't help but connect some of the things that you were talking about to some of these 21st century skills that we think are super, super important for young people, including critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication. And 3 of those C's just popped out right away. Was that creativity piece that you were talking about and how it rolls into financial literacy, and also the ability to critical think. And so I wanted to see, just for the educators out there, which means me and a lot of parents out there, how do we roll in some of the things you're talking about when it comes to creativity and critical thinking for our young people?
Sure. Well, my first step was, when I speak, I first need to define the word. As you know, being a practitioner, you need to be very clear with your definitions, because creativity to one person could mean something completely different to another. So my definition that I'm going forth is creativity is the process of problem finding and problem solving with relevance, value, and novelty. So, things that are useful, things that are new, right? But of course, there's nothing new under the sun, but there's the recombination of ideas. And then another thing I really want people to understand when they're looking at this within their classroom or within their home, and they're trying to build a culture of creativity, is that it's a skill. There's a lot of myths that I think America as a whole we need to break down, because it's like, you're creative, you're Steve Jobs, but the rest of us aren't, and so it's like, you guys have the special pixie dust, and the rest of us are just here, moving dirt out of piles for our whole life. And that's not the case. It's a skill, just like playing the flute, learning how to type. So when we look at the cognitive structures underneath what it means to be a creative thinker, then we can start really creating a classroom of creativity and a home of creativity. I actually say that my son was born at the right time when I'm doing my research, because as of right now, he's 2. So I get to see creativity, unadulterated, like in its fullest, purest form. And now it's my job to keep structures and things from dismantling it, now that I truly understand what is needed to build it and to help it flourish.
I don't know if you're familiar with Sir Ken Robinson's work about education, but that you just reminded me of his very first speech. And now it's the late Ken Robinson, unfortunately. But do schools kill creativity was the topic, was the name of his talk. And he really was sort of what got TED on fire early, were his speeches that had people coming back and back and back. And he makes a similar point. When did you first start to, like in the classroom, when did you first start to realize the need for creativity in that space?
Well, I've always been a arts person, an arts creative. My mother knew, she went to a psychology class when she was young before she even had kids. And the man was like, whatever you do, make sure your kids have a music education. And that just stuck in her head. So when we all hit 4th grade, we all had to join the band. And I'm so glad she did. So I was always a pure advocate for the arts, right? Artistic creativity. And because of my integration background, I always found ways. If you're a great educator, you know how to integrate well. You always see those entry points where you can make those connections and have your kids make those connections. So, you're doing social studies. So you're bringing in the music of the people you're talking about, and you're doing science. So you're bringing in sound waves, just those authentic or organic integrations. But the creativity that I now teach, in addition to artistic, was when we had an award-winning author come to our school. Her name is Catherine Applegate, and she is the author of the one and only Ivan. It was just made into a film. And this was in 2014. And I told the librarian who brought her, I was like, she just can't come and the kids ask her a few questions and she read and then she leaves. Like, we need to make this a big event, right? And so now my creative juices were happening. But as I was looking at the story, I wanted my kids to really dissect the story, make it their own, and give it back to her in their own creative way. So that's when we looked at the metaphorical thinking. Highly creative thinkers out there, the innovators of the business world, are good metaphorical thinkers. They're good, they make good associations, and they know how to connect the unconnected. So I just did that within the curriculum. These kids just took her story and they had to take like an object from the story and connect it to a main character and see how, like, one took the elephant and connected it to water and took the elements of water and talked about the character's traits through water. And it was just amazing because they got to enter the curriculum through entry points that they would not have normally went through had they not done these creative things. So metaphorical connections, turning things into artistic displays. So you have to, because the arts are about communication, right? They're a method of communication. So really just opening their eyes to there's more than one way to communicate your understanding of the story. That was the impetus of really what I'm doing now. And we put Karen Applegate in tears. She was in the back of the gym, like crying her eyes out. And your audience can go online and look up the one and only Ivan, Finding Ivan Through the Arts. And that's what I named that program, FITA, Finding Ivan Through the Arts. So they can look at what the kids did artistically and creatively to see how all this was birthed.
And to see why she cried.
Yes.
Dejana, I saw you taking some notes there. I'm assuming.
I was taking some notes for me, mom of 3 at home and also educator. I wonder, you said some things that I thought were really interesting. The question you posed us is to think about, what does it mean to be a creative thinker? Because oftentimes we think that's not us, or children think that's not me. So my question is, and for the viewers out there, is what does mean to be a creative thinker in my home? What does it mean to be a creative thinker in the classroom? What does it mean to be a creative thinker in the world that I interact in? What does that look like? And what are some things that I should be practicing to exercise my creative thinking muscle?
Bam. Now, that's a whole book right there, right? Out in 2022. My degree's in psychology, so I believe you have to start there. And because I'm now deep in this research and because I have a 2-year-old, I get to start at the beginning. So as you know, there is the different levels of the mind, the subconscious and conscious. And we really need to, as parents and as educators, be mindful of the subconscious, what's going into their subconscious, because it's building the framework for how they're going to be operating through the world. So with my son, starting at 1 year old, we wake up every morning and he says, I'm going to be creative today, or I am creative. When he goes to bed, he says, I was creative. And so there's the bookends of him building the identity of, I am a creative person. And then another thing is, if you look at children, I'm not sure how old your kids are, but even at the tender age of 2, so I know if he can do it, the older ones can. He's automatically making connections. To be creative just means you are are combining things that sometimes aren't normally needing to be combined. If you look at the beginning of the iPad or the iPhone, there's the circle thing. He got that from a padlock. He took a padlock and said, oh, look how it twists. I wonder if I can create an MP3 player with that same function. So, so really giving our kids just challenges of making those unknown, those unseen connections. Kind of like what I'm doing, financial literacy and creative thinking. Normally those are two different fields, but I'm putting the work in connecting them. Another thing that I do is I celebrate creativity. So his father had to kind of make the lamp not be so bright because it was too bright in his room through the night. So my husband built this like white paper thing out of just, construction paper. So I'm very intentional about saying, look, Sean, look what daddy did. He did that he was so creative. And I make Sean say, Daddy, you were so creative, because he took something which is called functional fixedness or functional flexibility. Children normally have functional flexibility, where my son took this placemat. I don't know if you can see it.
Okay.
and he put it on his head, right? He was about maybe one, about to turn two. And he was like, it's a hat. And he has never seen my husband and I put a placemat on our head. We don't do that on a regular basis. He's only seen us use it as a placemat. But for him to go out of the function of a placemat and say, well, today it's going to be a hat, that's the basis of your creative thinking. So adults have to practice getting out of the fixedness of things and saying, yes, this is a lipstick tube, but it could be and when the kids practice at the basic level, when they're in those boardrooms, moving millions of dollars or creating these programs that are going to really move social change in the right direction, it's those basic skills that they'll be relying on.
Well done. Well said. Well said. That's a call to action. I'm going to wake up in the morning. I am creative, and I was creative. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's not just for kids, folks.
Yeah.
That's for mom and dads too.
I'm wondering if you could say a few words about overcoming, especially teachers' reluctance to engage in, kind of open-ended creativity in the classroom. Like I've been at a lot of education events where, some brilliant idea like that, comes up and they say, oh yeah, that looks great. I'd love to engage my kids like that, except that, I have to grade. I don't want chaos in my classroom. I have the state framework to work. There's just all these reasons why I can't just sort of open these things up to, let students make those associations and come up with creative and inspiring stuff. And I'm wondering, what do you say to educators who say, maybe next week, maybe next month?
That's a great question, because it's true. And the beauty that I can speak to is I've been there. I'm not someone from the outside saying, well, you should do this. I've been in the classroom. I've had that class of 30 kids, and one's on the wall, it's just like, yes, I truly know. But the first thing is the urgency. Like, we don't really have a choice. And if AI and technology hasn't warned us that things are shifting quickly, the pandemic certainly has. So for our kids to be entering into adulthood without these basic skills that they were born with, we're doing them a huge disservice, because the program that you and I grew up with and our parents grew up with is no longer there. So they're going to have to learn how to be quick on their feet, how to make these associations, how to be adaptable, and how to create something out of nothing. That is creativity. So to answer your question, how our lessons, we have the language objective, we have the ELD objective. I started implementing a creative objective, which is, we know the kids need to know the information, but a lot of our lessons don't go to the level of how could they make it their own, and what can they create new from it that addresses an issue. We usually stop at the standardized test. And so taking that, just taking the time to implement that into our lesson framework, I think is going in the right direction. Now, when you're talking about classroom management, and yeah, it may be a little bit of extra work, because sometimes you can't scantron creativity, and it's sometimes subjective, like how do you rate, it's this creative thought versus another one. And so what I just did basically with the Catherine Applegate thing is they had the framework, they had the guidelines, but they had to defend. She talked about the 3 C's or the four C's. And if you look at the new framework that the nation took on, Common Core, it's all about, defending, justifying your position. So my students did have different creations because they interpreted the story different ways, and they had to create something, either a poem or some type of communication piece to defend their position. But if they defended it well, which you can grade their defense, then they got that particular score. So whether they defended it or produced a poem or just a movement piece, they still had to communicate where they were getting this information from and how this supported that. And so you're still bringing in those standards, but they created something that was not here before. And that's really what I was looking for.
Yeah, cool. Very cool.
And so you have been so transparent, Genein, in so much of your writing. So I'm curious if you would talk for a minute to the parents who are dealing with children. I know you had a speech impediment as a child. Like, who started the process of helping you through that? What can you say to parents who are struggling with those issues?
To parents and to teachers, I know sometimes, especially as an educator in my classroom, we want to be seen as the one, right? Come to me, I know it all. And I felt that was a lie, because I don't know it all. And I felt I was doing my kids a better service by letting them know my faults. And so when I did that TED Talk, before I did the TED Talk, I was in my classroom practicing in front of 5th graders and stuttering. And I didn't just deal with a speech impediment in my childhood. I still have it. I just am working through it. And it's a constant daily thing. But going through speech therapy, being a special education student and having an IEP, I had to reframe my stutter. And so instead of seeing it as a liability, I started to see it as a superpower of saying, even though I stutter, and there's some times where I can't even say my first name fluently, I still have to keep going, and I still have to walk out on that stage and advocate for my students, advocate for creativity and financial literacy. And so what I can tell parents and educators is, when we share our struggles through our life, it, number one, connects us better with our children and our students, because they understand, like, okay, wow, she isn't this perfect person who knows it all. She's been through some stuff too. And it empowers them to know that they can look at my coping skills. So I said, yeah, I had negative self-talk for a while. I had to switch that quickly in order to get the things that I needed done. And I'm very transparent in my books, because once people know that I've been through it, they can say, oh, I'm not alone. And there's some power in knowing that you're not alone. And Toastmasters wrote an article about my speech journey. And I had so many people reach out to me on LinkedIn who stutter as well, or who dealt with everyone deals with confidence issues or imposter syndrome, or just, that's just a human thing. But a lot of people who dealt with the stutter, that's big, because once you open your mouth, it's not like a depression issue, which is a very serious issue, but it's not something that I can just hide. The second you open your mouth, you can tell. And just to know that my story empowered other people to just try and get out on this stage. And even if you fail, that's okay. There's always tomorrow.
What a great attitude. Dejana, I saw you writing some more.
I know, I can't help it. I like to take notes. We get to, we're so fortunate to have conversations with really amazing people, and also broadcast these conversations, because these are things that everybody should be hearing about and talking about. And I love that you're so transparent with your story. And as an educator, I think that's really, really important when connecting with young people, so that they know we've been through it and we're still working on it, and we're all working on things for sure. I came in a little bit after you spoke, but I wanted to just touch on your connection between, I think it's something you call creative health and financial literacy. I find that very interesting. I don't know if you've already touched on that, but if you could just speak to that a little bit, on that intersection and how they help each other?
Sure. Once again, when I had my epiphany that I was a 30-year-old with no financial education and this doesn't seem right, I really looked at also the avenues of entrepreneurship and really what that looked like. And then reflection is key. And as artists, we know how reflection is key. And I looked through my elementary years and I was like, wait, I was that kid with the fanny pack and the Jolly Ranchers selling them for 5 cents each. I was at UCLA. I had like 6 jobs. I was very, very entrepreneurial. I just didn't know what to do with the money. I would just be buying Skechers and whatever. Once that financial aid check came in, because I just had no, financial acumen, but I was a hard worker and I was entrepreneurial. So I'm just like, I know I can't be the only one. And that's when it dawned on me that I was very creative and looking at solving problems and looking at how I can make money different ways by being of service to folks, that my creative health affected my financial outlook. And that I could produce, the programs at my school, like most of those programs at my elementary school that I started at, those came from my imagination, And so, and the money that my students have won from scholarships and just opportunities came from our imagination. So it's like, your imagination is a producer of wealth if you know how to use it right, and if you know the right tools to bring it to market. And that's why I think entrepreneurship training is key. I don't believe everyone should be a full-time entrepreneurial entrepreneur, but everyone should have a mindset of it, and even a side gig. When my kid hits 5, I don't care if you're selling lollipops to whatever. I want you to understand that there's a process, because if you have that skill, if you get hit with a pandemic like we're in now, at least you have some options. There's a lot of millions of people who don't have options because they don't have that fundamental basic skill of knowing that their creative health, their ability to solve people's problems, is attached to their financial wellness.
Are you thinking about any kind of curriculum for school around this? I was first going to ask you, how old do you think, like what age should we start teaching kids? But you already said you're getting your guy in there at 5 years old. It's time to start. So really from kindergarten on, should there be some sort of financial literacy curriculum available to teachers and for kids?
There is, and there's a lot of grassroots organizations. There's of course they leave me right when I need to say them. There's Next Gen personal finance. There's just things, different banks have different things. There's a lot of small things. So why the school district as a whole, especially the largest one, LAUSD, New York, haven't taken it on, I don't know. So, but as parents, we are their first educator. So we always need to be mindful of that. Another thing, going back to the psychology background, is kids start formulating their money mindset and their money framework as early as 3 years old. They understand like mine, as he's 2, he has responsibilities, put your diaper in the trash. That's no longer my responsibility. You can carry, you can walk, do it. And then the concept of work, what does that look like? And then him seeing mommy and daddy are working, people give us money when we work. And so it's that gradual ness. And he has a little piggy bank, and he has a book about money. So right now I'm introducing it to him in story form of what other people are doing. There's this exchange, right? And they also need to be mindful of the money culture in your home. Like, is money a stress culture? Does no one talk about it all? Is it, when people talk about it, is it normally a fighting thing, or is it a money everywhere, dollar bills flying out the sky? Or do people get bought stuff when someone messes up, or when daddy goes on a trip for a long time and comes back? There's certain things, there's certain patterns that these kids are watching, and we need to be understanding that we are setting their money mindset, and we need to be mindful of this money mindset that was set up in our own home when we were growing up. Like, is there a I Love Lucy relationship going on where the dad brings it home and only gives Lucy $40 to buy a dress? It's funny to watch the shows, but this is real life, and it's affecting the next generation. And what does saving look like? As you know, there's a lot of people who didn't have savings before this pandemic hit, and it's a real issue. So I think we're in a shift that financial literacy will be at the forefront because of this pandemic.
I think you're right. you know, I hate to say this, but we are out of time. And this has been so informative and so enjoyable. You're just really a pleasure to talk to. Thank you, Mark, for being with us again. And Dejana, I think it's time to say goodbye.
All right. Well, what can I say? Another great conversation. Thank you all for joining us. This is Teachers for Teachers. That's you, mom and dads. Until next time.